Jara Mitchell stood frozen in the doorway of his art studio, his hands trembling as he stared at the devastation before him. Paint splattered across every surface like a violent rainbow. Canvas after canvas lay in shreds on the floor, torn beyond recognition. Sculptures he'd spent months perfecting were smashed into unrecognizable fragments, and in the center of it all stood Bryony, his wife of 7 years, holding a hammer in one hand and a box cutter in the other, her chest heaving with rage. "You chose them over me!" she screamed, gesturing wildly at the destroyed paintings. "Every single day, Jara! Every single day you chose these worthless pieces of garbage over your own wife!" Jara's eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in each destroyed piece. The portrait series he'd created of his late mother. Gone. The abstract collection that had taken him 3 years to complete. Destroyed. The sculpture of intertwined hands that represented hope and connection, shattered on the floor like his heart. "Bryony," his voice came out as barely a whisper. "What have you done?" She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the ruined studio. "What have I done? What have you done, Jara? When was the last time you looked at me the way you look at your precious art? When was the last time you touched me with the same care you give to your paintings?" The hammer slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. For a moment, just a brief moment, Jara saw something flash across her face. Was it regret? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold defiance. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves dramatic stories, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. Also, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Now, to understand how they reached this devastating moment, we need to go back to where the cracks first began to show. Orchestrated narrative progression through relationship deterioration and artistic conflict. Good start with the hook. Now I need to build up the backstory, showing how their relationship deteriorated. I'll continue with the build-up, showing Jara's dedication to art and how it created distance in their marriage. Jara had always been an artist. Even as a child growing up in Portland, Oregon, he saw the world differently than others. Where people saw a rusty fence, he saw texture and history. Where they saw a rainy day, he saw a canvas of grays and silvers waiting to be captured. His mother, Elaine, had been his biggest supporter. She'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his art supplies, to send him to weekend workshops, to nurture the gift she saw in him. When she passed away from cancer 5 years ago, Jara poured his grief into his art. It became his therapy, his way of keeping her memory alive. He painted her smile, her hands that had held him as a child, the way sunlight caught in her silver hair. Those paintings weren't just art to him. They were pieces of his soul, fragments of the woman who'd believed in him when no one else did. Bryony had understood that once. When they first married, she'd sit in his studio for hours, watching him work, bringing him coffee, asking about his techniques. She'd been his muse, his supporter, his safe harbor. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It started small. A comment here and there about how much time he spent in the studio. A sigh when he said he couldn't make dinner because he was in the middle of a piece. Then the comments became arguments. The sighs became slammed doors, and the love that had once filled their home slowly drained away like paint running off a tilted canvas. "I'm not saying you should give up art," Bryony had said 6 months ago, her voice tight with frustration. They were sitting at their kitchen table, barely touching the dinner she'd prepared. "I'm saying I need to be a priority too. We haven't been on a date in 4 months, Jara. 4 months. You spend more time with your brushes than with your wife. Jara had reached for her hand, but she pulled away. You know the gallery exhibition is coming up. This could change everything for us, Bryony. If I can just sell a few pieces, we won't have to worry about money anymore. I'm doing this for us. No, she'd said, standing up from the table. You're doing this for you. You've always done everything for you. That conversation had been the beginning of the end, though Jara hadn't realized it at the time. He'd thrown himself even deeper into his work, telling himself that success would solve their problems. If he could just create something extraordinary, if he could just get recognized, then Bryony would understand. Then she'd see that his sacrifice had been worth it. But success never came. The gallery exhibition was postponed. The art critic who'd promised to review his work never showed up. The potential buyer who'd expressed interest in his mother's portrait series backed out at the last minute. Month after month, rejection after rejection, Jara kept working, kept hoping, kept believing that the next piece would be the one. Meanwhile, Bryony grew colder. She stopped coming into his studio. She stopped asking about his work. She stopped waiting up for him when he worked late into the night. They became strangers living in the same house, passing each other in hallways, sleeping on opposite sides of the bed, with an ocean of silence between them. Last week, Jara had finally gotten the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. A prestigious art dealer from New York had contacted him after seeing his work online. She wanted to see his full portfolio, everything he'd created over the past 5 years. This was it, the moment that would justify all the sacrifice, all the late nights, all the strain on his marriage. He'd burst into the kitchen where Bryony was making breakfast, his phone still clutched in his hand. Bryony, you won't believe this. Sienna Hartford from Hartford Contemporary wants to see my work. This is huge. This could be... I want a divorce. The words had hit him like a physical blow. He'd stood there, phone still in hand, his excitement draining away like water through his fingers. What? Bryony hadn't even turned around from the stove. I want a divorce, Jara. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm done. But I just got the biggest opportunity of my career. This changes everything. We can finally... I don't care. She'd finally turned to face him, and her eyes were empty. I don't care about your art anymore. I don't care about your opportunities. I care about having a husband who actually sees me, who talks to me, who chooses me, and you can't do that. You never could. They'd barely spoken since that morning. Jara had been in his studio day and night, preparing his portfolio for Sienna Hartford. He'd been photographing his pieces, organizing them, creating a presentation that would blow her away. He'd been so focused, so consumed by the possibility of finally achieving his dream. He should have paid attention to the warning signs, the way Bryony watched him with those cold eyes, the way she stood in the doorway of his studio, her jaw clenched, the way she'd asked him, one final time, "Are you ever going to choose me over your art?" He'd barely looked up from the canvas he was working on. Bryony, please, not now. I'm almost done with this piece. That had been his answer. Not now. Not ever. And so she'd waited until he left for the grocery store. She'd walked into his studio with a hammer, a box cutter, and 7 years of accumulated rage, and she'd destroyed it all. Now, standing in the ruins of his life's work, Jara felt something inside him break. Not just his heart, something deeper. The part of him that had believed in love, in partnership, in the possibility that two people could weather any storm together. Get out, he said quietly. Bryony's eyes widened. What? Get out! His voice exploded through the studio, raw and broken. Get out of my studio! Get out of my house! Get out of my life! She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. For the first time since he'd known her, Bryony looked frightened. She stumbled backward, then turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the house. Jara sank to his knees among the destroyed paintings, his hands touching the torn canvas of his mother's portrait. Tears streamed down his face as he picked up a piece of the sculpture he'd created in her memory. 7 years of work, hundreds of pieces, thousands of hours, all destroyed in an afternoon. But as he knelt there in the ruins, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands and saw an email notification. From Sienna Hartford, Hartford Contemporary Art Gallery. Subject, your portfolio. Review. We need to meet ASAP. His hands trembled as he opened the email, hardly daring to breathe as he read the words that would change everything. The email blurred before Jara's tear-filled eyes as he read it once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. Mr. Mitchell, I've reviewed the preliminary photos of your work that you sent last week, and I must say I'm genuinely impressed. Your use of color and emotional depth is exactly what we're looking for in our upcoming exhibition, Voices of Loss and Love. However, I need to see the actual pieces in person within the next 48 hours. We have a collector flying in from Dubai who specifically requested contemporary American artists working in emotional portraiture. If your work is as powerful in person as it appears in photographs, we're prepared to offer you a spot in our spring exhibition and potentially purchase 3 pieces for our permanent collection. This is time-sensitive. Please confirm your availability immediately. Sienna Hartford. Jara's hand shook so violently that he nearly dropped the phone. 48 hours. She wanted to see his work in 48 hours. The work that was now lying in shreds around him, like the remnants of his shattered life. A sound escaped his throat. Half laugh, half sob. Of course this would happen now, after years of rejection, after years of sacrifice, after years of choosing his art over everything else. The moment finally arrives, and he has nothing to show for it. Nothing but torn canvas and broken dreams. He staggered to his feet, his legs unsteady beneath him. His eyes moved frantically around the studio, desperately searching for something, anything that might have survived Bryony's rampage. In the far corner, beneath a toppled easel, he spotted a canvas that looked relatively intact. He rushed over, his heart pounding with desperate hope. It was one of his earlier works, a piece he'd painted 3 years ago titled The Weight of Silence. It depicted a solitary figure sitting at a window, bathed in gray light, surrounded by shadows that seemed to press in from all sides. It wasn't part of his mother's series, but it was powerful. It was raw. It was something. He pulled out his phone and called Sienna Hartford's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the second ring. Sienna Hartford speaking. Ms. Hartford, this is Jara Mitchell. I just received your email. Excellent. Can you be in New York by Thursday morning? I've arranged for the collector to meet with several artists, but I'd like you to be first. Jara looked around at the destruction, his throat tightening. Ms. Hartford, I need to be honest with you. There's been an incident. Most of my portfolio has been damaged. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, damaged? What kind of damage? Destroyed, actually. Nearly everything. He could barely force the words out. But I have some pieces that survived, and I can... Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate your honesty, but I'm afraid this won't work. The collector specifically wanted to see a comprehensive body of work. I'm sorry, but please. The word came out as a desperate plea. Just give me a chance. One piece. Look at one piece and then decide. I'm begging you. Another long silence. One piece. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. My gallery in Chelsea. If it doesn't move me, this conversation is over. Understood? Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much. After he hung up, Jara carefully lifted The Weight of Silence and carried it to the only clean table left in the studio. He examined every inch of it under the light. A few paint splatters on the frame, but the canvas itself was miraculously untouched. It would have to be enough. He was carefully wrapping the painting in protective cloth when he heard footsteps behind him. He spun around to find Bryony standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Jara, Don't." His voice was cold, dead. "Don't say a word. I need you to understand why I did this." She took a tentative step into the studio, her hands twisting together. "I've been invisible to you for so long. Do you even remember our anniversary last month? I made reservations at that restaurant we went to on our first date. I bought a new dress. I waited for 3 hours, and you never showed up. You were here, working on a painting, and you forgot I even existed." Jara felt a stab of guilt, but it was quickly overwhelmed by rage. "So you destroyed everything? Everything I've ever created? 7 years of work, Bryony. Paintings of my mother, the only thing I have left of her, and you destroyed them. Because they mattered more to you than I did." Her voice broke. "Those paintings got more love, more attention, more care than I ever did. I needed you to feel what I've been feeling. I needed you to lose something precious so you'd finally understand." "You didn't just destroy paintings," Jara said, his voice shaking. "You destroyed my soul. Every brushstroke was a piece of me. Every canvas was a memory, a feeling, a moment I was trying to preserve. And you took a hammer to all of it." Bryony's face crumpled. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just so angry, so hurt. Jara, I know I went too far. I know I can't undo what I did. But maybe this is what we both needed. Maybe now we can start over. Maybe now you'll finally see that there's more to life than art." Jara stared at her in disbelief. "Start over? You think we can start over after this? We can go to counseling. We can work on our marriage. Now that your art is gone, maybe you can finally focus on us." The words hit him like ice water. "Now that your art is gone." She didn't understand. She still didn't understand. "Get out," he said quietly. "Jara." "I said get out. I have a meeting in New York in 2 days. A meeting that could change my life. A meeting I can barely prepare for because you destroyed everything I needed to show them. So get out of my sight before I say something I can't take back." Bryony's face hardened. "Fine. Go to your meeting. Chase your impossible dream. But when you come back empty-handed, when you realize that I was right and your art was never going to save you, don't come crying to me. The divorce papers will be waiting." She turned and walked out, and Jara heard the front door slam with such force that the remaining paintings on the walls shuddered. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. 2 days. He had 2 days to get to New York, to present one painting to a prestigious art dealer, to somehow convince her that he was worth taking a chance on. 2 days to save his career, his dream, his entire life's purpose. He looked at the weight of silence, at the solitary figure trapped in gray light, and for the first time, he truly understood what he'd painted. That figure was him, had always been him, alone, isolated, separated from the world by glass, watching life happen on the other side while remaining forever unreachable. Had Bryony been right? Had he sacrificed his marriage, his relationship, his chance at real connection for paintings that might never be seen, never be valued, never matter to anyone but himself? But before he could spiral deeper into that dark thought, his phone buzzed again. Another email. This time from an address he didn't recognize. Subject: "I know what your wife did, and I have proof." Jara's blood ran cold as he opened the email and began to read words that would turn his entire understanding of the past 7 years completely upside down. Jara's hands trembled as he read the email, each word hitting him like a physical blow. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Lynette Pascoe. And I'm your neighbor in apartment 4B. I witnessed what happened in your studio this afternoon through my window. I know this may seem intrusive, but I've been concerned about you and your wife for some months now. What I'm about to tell you is difficult, but you deserve to know the truth. I recorded everything that happened today on my phone, including your wife's destruction of your artwork. But there's more. 3 days ago, I overheard your wife on her phone in the building's courtyard talking to someone named Griffin. She said, and I quote, "I'm going to destroy everything in his studio tomorrow when he goes to the store. He'll have nothing left to show that New York dealer. Then he'll finally give up this ridiculous dream and get a real job. Or he'll leave, and either way, I get what I want." Mr. Mitchell, this wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated. I have the video evidence, the audio recording, and I'm willing to testify if you need to pursue legal action. I'm also willing to share these recordings with your insurance company if you have coverage for your artwork. Please contact me at this number, 503-555-0147. What she did was not only cruel, it was criminal. You deserve justice. Jara read the email 3 more times, his emotions cycling through disbelief, rage, grief, and finally, clarity. Bryony hadn't destroyed his art in a moment of passionate anger. She'd planned it, calculated it, executed it with cold precision, intending to break him so completely that he'd either give up his dreams entirely or leave so she could move on with her life. Griffin. Who was Griffin? He didn't have to wonder long. He pulled up Bryony's social media profiles on his phone, something he hadn't done in months, and there it was. Recent photos he'd never seen. Bryony at dinner with a man Jara didn't recognize. Bryony at a concert, the same man's arm around her shoulders. The posts were all from the past 3 months, carefully hidden from Jara's view, tagged with location markers from nights when she'd claimed to be working late or out with her sister. The betrayal cut deeper than the destroyed paintings. It wasn't just his art she'd wanted to destroy. It was him, his spirit, his hope, his reason for living. She'd wanted to break him down until there was nothing left, and then she could walk away without guilt, blaming him for choosing art over marriage while she'd been choosing another man over their vows. Jara called Lynette Pascoe immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Mitchell?" "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for reaching out. Can you send me everything you have?" "Already done. Check your email. I've also contacted your building's insurance company on your behalf and filed a police report for destruction of property. Mr. Mitchell, I'm an attorney. I specialize in family law. If you want to file charges against your wife, I'll help you pro bono. What she did was not just morally wrong, it's legally actionable." Tears streamed down Jara's face, but for the first time that day they weren't tears of despair. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me you'll keep creating. I've seen you through my window working late into the night, pouring your soul onto those canvases. The world needs to see your art, Mr. Mitchell. Don't let her take that away from you." After he hung up, Jara opened the files Lynette had sent. The video was damning. Bryony systematically destroying painting after painting, sculpture after sculpture, with methodical precision. This wasn't rage. This was calculated destruction. And the audio recording from 3 days earlier confirmed everything. But Jara didn't have time to process it all. He had less than 48 hours to get to New York. He carefully packed the weight of silence, made arrangements for a red-eye flight, and spent the night in a hotel, unable to stay in the house he'd shared with Bryony for one more moment. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray in New York City. Jara stood outside Hartford Contemporary Art Gallery at 9:45 a.m., his carefully wrapped painting under his arm, his heart hammering in his chest. Everything had led to this moment, every sacrifice, every late night, every brush stroke, every argument with Bryony, every destroyed canvas. It all came down to what happened in the next hour. The gallery was stunning. White walls, perfect lighting, hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors. Sienna Hartford met him at the door. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that seemed to see through pretense directly to truth. "Mr. Mitchell, one painting. Impress me." Jara carefully unwrapped the weight of silence and placed it on the easel she'd prepared. Then he stepped back and let the painting speak for itself. Sienna circled the painting slowly, her expression unreadable. She examined it from every angle, leaning in close to study the brushwork, stepping back to take in the full composition. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me about this piece." Jara took a deep breath. "I painted this 3 years ago, during a time when I felt completely isolated from the world. The figure is trapped behind glass, watching life happen on the other side, but unable to reach it, unable to connect. I thought I was painting loneliness, but I was really painting myself. Someone so focused on capturing moments that I forgot to live them. Someone so determined to create beauty that I couldn't see the beauty right in front of me. Someone who built walls of canvas and paint between himself and the people who loved him." "And now?" Sienna asked, her eyes never leaving the painting. "What do you see when you look at it now?" "Now I see a choice. The figure can stay behind the glass, safe and isolated, or they can break through and risk everything for real connection. I spent 7 years choosing the glass, and yesterday my wife destroyed every painting I've ever created to show me what that choice cost me." Sienna turned to look at him fully for the first time. "She destroyed your work?" "All of it. Except this one. I came here with one painting because it's all I have left. But maybe—" His voice cracked. "Maybe that's fitting. Maybe I needed to lose everything to understand what matters." Sienna studied him for a long moment, then looked back at the painting. "The collector canceled," she said quietly. Jara's heart plummeted. "What?" "He canceled this morning. Decided to go with established artists only." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But I'm not buying for him. I'm buying for me, for my gallery, and for everyone who's ever felt trapped behind glass." She turned to face him fully. "Jara Mitchell, I want this painting for our permanent collection. I'm offering you $15,000 for this piece and a solo exhibition next spring. I want you to recreate your portfolio. Paint everything you lost, paint everything you've learned, paint the pain and the growth and the breaking and the rebuilding. I want 50 pieces from you in 6 months. Can you do that?" Jara couldn't speak. He could only nod, tears streaming down his face. "Good. My assistant will draw up the contracts." Sienna extended her hand. "Welcome to Hartford Contemporary, Mr. Mitchell. I think you're going to change a lot of lives with your art." 3 months later, Jara stood in his new studio, a space 3 times larger than his old one, flooded with natural light, paid for by his advance from the gallery. The divorce from Bryony had been swift and brutal. She'd fought the charges at first, claiming temporary insanity, but Lynette's evidence was irrefutable. Bryony had been ordered to pay restitution for the destroyed artwork, based on insurance valuations. The amount was substantial enough that she'd had to sell the house they'd shared. Griffin, it turned out, had left her the moment legal troubles started mounting. Some loves, Jara learned, only survive in comfortable circumstances. But Jara didn't spend much time thinking about Bryony anymore. He was too busy creating. Canvas after canvas came to life under his brushes, some recreating pieces he'd lost, others expressing everything he'd experienced in the months since that devastating day. Pain and betrayal? Yes, but also hope. Rebirth. Second chances. His phone buzzed with a text from Lynette. Saw the preview of your exhibition in Art Forum magazine. Your mother would be so proud. I know I am. Jara smiled and looked at the canvas before him. A new piece titled Breaking Through Glass. It showed the same solitary figure from The Weight of Silence. But this time, they were stepping through shattered glass, reaching toward light, toward life, toward connection. Their face showed fear and pain, but also determination, also hope. He picked up his brush, mixed his colors, and continued painting. Because that's what artists do. They take the broken pieces of their lives and create something beautiful. They transform pain into purpose. They show the world that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly capable of creating. And sometimes, the most wicked betrayal becomes the catalyst for the greatest transformation. Jara's story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But he'd learned the most important lesson an artist, or any person, could learn. True art isn't about hiding from life behind a canvas. It's about living fully, feeling deeply, and having the courage to share those experiences with the world, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts, because that's when it matters most.